Um, Thank you for being here. These mean a great deal to me, and I know that they mean a great deal to others as well. I would like to start just by giving credit and thanks to Diane, because without Diane, none of us would be sitting here tonight, at least of all me, um, because of the sacrifice and the hard work over 40 years of devotion and sacrifice, and the ultimate display of loyalty to a greater plan. Everything that we're going to talk about tonight is inspired, and I thank her every day. And so here we are. This is the second webinar. This one, at the end of the last webinar, I said we should do one on the structure of space. And so that's what we're doing tonight. Whilst I was putting together these slides, and these slides are very basic. Every time I tried to create these slides, I've tried 3 or 4 times, I'd end up with so many drawings and diagrams breaking off into other diagrams. It's such a complex thing, but as Alonis has always said, there's a simplicity within the complexity. So what I'm endeavouring to do tonight is cover. There's about 12 or 13 slides, cover a lot of very significant information, some very core concepts to how to understand where we are, what is the structure of space, where are we, why are we where we are, and through that process of understanding some very core concepts, getting a better picture as to where we actually are and what the structure of space is. Going through the slides, they may seem like they don't quite bolt together, but in the end, I'm sure they will. There are some fundamentals I believe we need to know about and discuss. If there is any questions, please jump up at the moment. We're better to do them while we're talking about a diagram. And so back to the point about another group, perhaps a gateway group, discussion group, because I can only say so much. There's only so many things I can try and describe. And the only way to truly understand the depth of the greater plan that lives within you and that we all represent collectively is to experience it. And dreams are very important to understand our dreams. To access our dreams is very important. And if we can learn to access our dreams, we can get a recall of what we're doing through the night. As Mark Aile said, I believe it was around 1996, he said that 2/3 of the work we do is done through the night when we sleep. And there's a reason for that. And tonight's going to explain why the night state is so important, and therefore why dreams are important. And we access the night state through the gateway of our mind, and the gateway experience is about traveling inside your own mind, both to your dreams and also beyond the consciousness at night state, and to know where we go and why we go there. And so I am very open to the idea of having a second group. So this group will remain as a journey of the spirit group around the larger topics, the bigger questions. But for a personal experience and exercises and dream sharing and interpretation, there's lots of things that happen in dreams which are important to understand from the bigger context. So there's a more of a personal working group, and there'll be this larger format for the illusion of reality called the journey of the spirit. So that's what I'm thinking about. Thank you, Mary, for the inception of the idea. So that's what I'm thinking about. So if you are interested in that, whether it's once a month, whether it's once a fortnight, whether it's once a week, I really don't know. Please email me after this tonight group, because I'd like to know who is seriously interested, because it'll obviously take time and commitment, but it is, I think, one of the greatest commitments we can actually make. So as people often hear from me, only because I'm so passionate about it, I dream and record every single night. Some of the experiences leave me speechless. Some of them leave me in tears. Some of them just leave me understanding a greater depth of what's actually happening here. So that being said, welcome. So tonight is about the structure of space. I'm going to start by sharing an experience before I get into the slides. And that is because it's important to understand that if we want to experience the illusion of reality, we have to live it. We can't just live our lives being the person we believe we are and hoping for experiences, hoping for things to change, hoping for perception to change, hoping for reality to break or time to slip. These things can happen, but unless we believe in our intuition and then we trust the smallest gut feelings and follow them without question, when we do that, we open ourselves up to experiences which Diane and I lived by. And the point I'm making is when we listen to our intuition, we often get a feeling or follow a direction that leads us to experience something which is out of this world, which is a break in reality, which is something that shows this is a matrix system. This is a simulation. This is not real. This is a fabrication of memory. This is, as I've often said, a mosaic of different programs, different memory structures put together to look like reality for a specific purpose. And we're going to go into that purpose tonight. But the truth remains, if we follow our instinct, whether we realize the result of that or not, it doesn't matter. We follow our instincts, we follow our gut, we follow our intuition. That's what leads us to understanding and experiencing the illusion of this reality. All the experience in the documentary is because Diane or I or both of us just went with what we were experiencing, and then you find yourself entering into a different domain of experience. Your perception changes. Every time you have an experience, your perception changes. So the experience I want to share with you only happened on the 14th to the 15th of this month. It's the most recent physical experience that I've had. Not a night state experience, not a dream, not a meditative experience or a gateway experience. An actual physical experience. So I'm going to jump over to the first couple of slides, and I want to talk through this. And I'm going to explain a bit of a story, which will connect into the diagrams that I'll be sharing tonight as well. Now, tonight could go for an hour, it could go for 2 hours. I mean, I really don't know. But what I do know is that tonight's information is fundamentally the most important information that I believe positively you will ever hear, because it frames, as I said, why we're here, where we are, and the point to it all. And then, of course, I expect and would hope this will open up into many other discussion webinars where we're exploring different parts of what that means. This is a picture of my humble little deck in Auckland, looking over the next door neighbour's house. And you'll see, please ignore the small actual moon at the bottom above the house roof line in that picture, but look at the moon I've just cut and pasted into the top of the picture. So on the 14th of September, which is, of course, the date we were given in 2003. We were told in a very, very significant document, which we call the riddle document, which some of you will have heard about. It's a document that we were given vital information about the future. And there was a riddle that was given. And they gave us a riddle because we had to understand it, unravel the riddle, because, of course, they tell us at the time what we need to hear to unravel it in the future, because when we do unravel it, it's the right time and the right place with the right level of comprehension. There's no point, and they would never give us answers just because we ask questions. They would only tell us what we need to hear because, of course, their visibility beyond space and time knows everything that we don't. And there's a humility in that. And so that night, 2003, Alana spoke to Diane and myself. Well, actually, the three parts of the riddle was this. Disbelieve everything you believe in. Do not doubt yourself ever. And there is no end to the beginning you will find. And that was the riddle. Now, I've come to completely understand that riddle, and it took 20 years to understand that riddle. And it was only after Diane was a part of the shift that the riddle could be understood. And we'll go into a bit more of that a little later tonight. So the point is, on that night, Alanis mentioned that we would see each other again in another location on the 14th of September. I didn't realize at the time it would take 22 years. And again, there's a number sequence in itself. It would take 22 years until that 14th of September actually came around. And so what happened on this night, if I can just step into the story, I was just walked out of the kitchen into my lounge room here. And of course, had his feeling, had a very strong feeling. And when I get feelings, they're words, they're feelings, they're a very powerful sense of. I was told to stand in front of the window and look outside. And so I followed my feelings and I stood in front of the window, pulled the curtains back, and I looked outside. I saw, of course, the full moon was bright up in the sky. That it was very bright, very high, and I thought, "Wow, okay, maybe it's to acknowledge the power of the full moon that's rising into the sky." So I sat back against the couch where I got sat on the floor, just looking out the window, and I just sat there. And as I did, I felt this overwhelming sense of something was just different. And immediately in front of me, almost like out of the folds of the curtain, a face appeared, a very, very clear face. What really caught me by surprise was that it was kind of my face, but a bit different. And I knew very, very deeply that it was a version of me that I, as this human program character, had been created from. And he was looking at me, and he was looking at me with a lot of concentration to get my attention and kind of turning his head a bit to the side. As soon as I realized that I was looking at something quite powerful, my eyes shifted to the clock and it was 9:09 p.m. And of course, number sequences always keep appearing often when things happen. So that happened, and then I was suddenly triggered with an experience that happened on the 10th of February in 2007. I want to explain this experience because it's very, very important before we get into the structure of space. So, looking at the moon high in the sky, and I'm taken back to 2007. Now, in this experience, Diane and I were sitting on the couches meditating. Diane had her own deeply significant experience, which actually turned out to be a blow by blow prophecy of the next 13 years of her life and the ultimate direction it would take. And we didn't understand it then because it didn't make any sense. But of course, I have the dream records now, and I know what, well, the meditation records, I know what she meditated on, and it was all prophecy. So for me, what happened was I was sitting on the couch. In front of me was this enormous energy stood in front of me. It was the greatest essence of light I could imagine. It was a being of light stood right in front of me out of my third eye. I could see. Next to it was this rotating vortex. I could see it with my physical eyes, and I could see this rotating vortex and this huge being. Next, the being was standing where Diane was sitting. It was a higher aspect of Alonus, what we call he, and it was standing there, and the vortex was rotating, and I found myself being drawn into the vortex, and it was as real as you and me sitting here tonight. It was so real. I was being drawn into the vortex, and I started to move into the vortex, and I started to go through the vortex. I was out of my body. I was traveling through this vortex. All of a sudden, I felt this enormous tug from below, as if something had grabbed onto my legs and was trying to pull me down. And this beautiful energy of light that was with this vortex kept pulling me forward through the vortex, and whatever it was on my legs slipped off, or that was the sensation, like it lost grip. And then it happened again, and it pulled so hard. It was like my astral body was being just wrenched down into these, and I knew I could see where it wanted to take me. It was trying to pull me into very deep, very dark, very dense places. It was coming up from somewhere very dense, and it was trying to pull me down because I was out of my body. Again, the energy of light, pure, it just carried me forward, and the thing slipped off, and I kept moving through the vortex. And and even though I was out of my body, it was a physical sensation. So I kept moving through the vortex. I moved through space, and then the most incredible thing happened. And I just want to assert this is as real as me sitting here today. It was one of the most vivid experiences of my life. I moved through the vortex and I found myself suddenly standing in the best thing I can describe it is as like a glass chamber. And I looked around through the glass and I could see humans that were humans, but very almost like refined humans. They had white one-piece suits on. Some of them had long hair, some of them didn't, and they were working very quickly and furiously over these kind of computer consoles, very sophisticated, very futuristic kind of computer consoles. And they were madly checking things and looking at things. And I looked at them and I felt so calm and still and bewildered, like, where was I? And I looked through and saw them all. There was probably about 4 or 5 of them walking around with these checking their stuff. And then I turned to my right, and on my right-hand side, I looked through to another section of this chamber I was standing in, and I saw Diane's body laying down on a bed, and she was unconscious. And I knew that that was her real self, her real human self, that was asleep and projecting into the woman that was on the couch opposite me in where I'd come from. And then as I looked around, I looked at my own hands, and I remember very clearly looking at this, my left hand, and looking at my left hand and actually realizing, my goodness, I'm a hologram. I'm actually a hologram. And I actually had that thought as I looked at my left hand. And I knew I wasn't real. I knew I was just a hologram, but I was okay with that because what lived inside me is real, but this was just a shell. And as I realized that, something else caught my attention to my right side. And as I started to turn around to understand what it was, I knew what it was. I knew it was me. I knew it was the real version of Jason that I was duplicated from. And it was on the other side of the glass. And as I turned to look at it, my consciousness wouldn't let me see myself. And I knew that it's because if I saw myself, it would overload my mind and I wouldn't maintain stability. And then I realized all the people in this experience checking all these, I don't know, sophisticated holographic kind of computer things, they were maintaining the integrity of my holographic body out of the simulation of the matrix into this chamber, which was like a stasis chamber. And they were holding me, my integrity as a hologram in this real earth space. And that was my real self on the other side of the glass. But I couldn't see him because it was overwhelming. So as I tried to focus in on him, the whole experience started to reverse and I was pulled back and I woke up back in my body on the couch. I was in shock. Diane asked me what was wrong. I went through the experience and I was literally in shock. What I didn't realize until I found that experience again just after the 14th of September was that that was on the 10th of February 2007, which is precisely 13 years to the day that Diane passed away and the shift occurred. 13 years, the number 13 is a significant number because that is the number that takes us past the illusion of reality. The 13th gate, it's the energy point of our energy structures, which is beyond the 12 sections of the wheel of time. And 13 is the gate that takes us to the real. And so 13 years to the day, those two experiences were separated. I went through the gateway to a real earth and then came back again. Now, that experience in itself is vastly important, and we'll get to the 13th gate a little bit later in the diagrams. But what I want to say is that you're looking at this picture on the screen right now, and that's what I saw. The moon was right up there. It was even probably a little higher. It was very high in the sky. And the miraculous thing was, I went back the next night to look at the full moon, and if I scroll down, and at exactly the same time, that's where it was in the sky. Now, I can't tell you what happened the night before the 14th because we had clouds, and the night after the 15th, it was in this position almost again. So this is impossible according to the lunar cycle. And so my point is this, if I go up again, I was called to the window to see that they had altered reality to align to a certain conjunction of energy to allow the real to connect into me on that moment, on that day, 9:09 is an interesting time. And then, of course, once that was over, the program was put back to its regular pathway. And that's the control, and that's the things that happen when you expand your energy, you open your gateway, you enter into other experiences. You don't care if you're right or wrong. You just trust yourself. You don't listen to your brain. You trust your intuition. You don't listen to your fear. You trust your love. You don't listen to uncertainty. You trust yourself. And when you do that, these kinds of things are what happened. And everything in the documentary is the same. And so that happened only a little over a week ago. And it's an extraordinary thing because it allowed me to remember the experience, which showed me that it was 13 years in between the shift and that experience. That's context for the diagrams I want to show you as well. So this all connects together. And so I just wanted to share that experience because it does connect into what I'm about to say. So I'm just going to flip back over here. Um, so just before I proceed to the diagrams, if there's any questions about that experience as to anything I might have meant by the things I said, please ask them now, or I can move on to the structure of space diagrams. Okay. And I think that's what flagged my mind as to starting a group that if anyone wants to start to talk about dreams, start to share dreams with no pressure of having to remember dreams, but to be a part of a work group that starts to develop intuitive abilities and start to develop internal investigation. So that's the experience that happened, and that's why I want to go through these diagrams is because the when I say the real Earth, when I say the illusion of the reality, the simulation, we need to understand what those things mean, and so that's what we'll proceed with now. If there's no questions or comments, okay, okay. Just to honor for a moment the reason why that I created this graphic for the documentary is because, of course, as you can see behind the Earth cube there, there's Orion. Orion is the entry point that our energy takes to get into this sector of space. It is the connection point. The Pleiades is an exchange system of energy, which is quite curious that we're all in New Zealand, except for a couple of people in Aussie right now. But the Pleiades, which is of course that's Matariki in New Zealand, it's a very important symbol for the Maori mythology and belief system. But the Matariki, which is one of the stars in the Pleiades star system, the Pleiades star system is an exchange system between Orion and Earth. So there's lots of reasons why New Zealand seems to be important for many of us right now. So Orion is, of course, the entry point into this sector of space, and we'll go into sectors of space shortly as well. Of course, the wheel, the vortex wheel, there's 12 segments. You can tell by the inverted Roman numerals because everything is in reverse here, and I'll explain that too. And of course, the Earth is a cube because we live in a three-dimensional space, and whilst it operates as a flat plane, and whilst it has the illusion of a sphere in terms of outer space, it is in fact a cube, and we actually live in a hypercube. A 10-dimensional hypercube is our best estimate. Science seems to correlate that, not that it's spoken about very often. And of course, the pyramids is because the entry point into the Earth chamber from Orion through the Mars connection was, of course, Egypt. And that was the entry point of Alanis through an Egyptian named Asmar, who was actually Diane's life in Egypt. And then, of course, Egypt connects into now. So that there's a whole symmetry to that picture. And I just wanted to take a moment to explain why that picture was the way it was, even though it may have been obvious. Okay. So I want to start with this. I want to go back to the very, very beginning. You've often heard me say that this was originally a training program. And those of you who've read The Greatest Story Never Told, and possibly even the Temple of Remembrance and the Sands of Time, the smaller parable books that Diane wrote, but primarily The Greatest Story Never Told, Amon talks about some of the stories about Amon's experience as an initiate. And then, of course, Amon is writing the book through Diane as someone who assists initiates through the program. So he was once an initiate and went through the program on his own. And of course, as a being that evolves past that, helps others enter the experience for their own reasons. And so the original recreation of time, which we call the original training program, is a place where beings of what we really are, our greater essence of light, beings would come into the training program to have an experience. I said last time it might be for a moment, an event, a year, but not usually for a long time, but for an experience. We would symbolically lay down in a dream chamber, or a place where we could project our mind through a very sophisticated integrated system, and we would dream ourselves into a character, and there's a way that happens, which I'll go through shortly. But essentially, we have to look that this space is the best way to look at it is it's a 10-dimensional hypercube. We can't imagine what that is. As you can see here, 2 dimensions, 3 dimensions, that's what we can perceive. We feel, of course, fourth dimension, all time is simultaneous. But beyond that, we have very difficult times imagining what 10 dimensions would be like. We're not capable of with a 3 dimensional, fourth dimensional consciousness. So imagine that as a very infinitely complex cube structure, which is obviously moving and shifting all the time. And so we live in a 10-dimensional hypercube. Well, so the original training program was a 10-dimensional hypercube, and it had 12 sectors, 12. We say the 12 worlds of Zor. That doesn't mean 12 planets. It means 12 sectors, 12 areas of many, many worlds. And so that could arguably call the wheel of time. And of course, when you have 12 sectors and 10 dimensions, you have 120 programs. And Alonis and Mark L would often talk in depth about the 120 programs, the original program. And so when the entirety of this creation was created by a group called the Mazadine from the Citron galaxy in the real. The Mazadine were simulation experts. They created the construct of a memory system you could permeate your mind into, and we would move into this experience. Sometimes Earth, other worlds, many different worlds. 12 evolutionary sectors. There's three main areas. So there's the higher worlds where light, non-corporeal life is the dominant existence form. There's the mid heavens, or the mid evolutionary worlds, which are of course where there's high sophistication but not necessarily high evolution. So you have a lot of species, a lot of alien civilizations, interdimensional civilizations, not necessarily categorized as light, but they are sophisticated and highly collective, and sometimes not exactly using those skills to the best advantage of everyone. And then you have the lower worlds, the lower evolutionary worlds, the lower heavens, if you like. And of course, Earth being a three-dimensional reality fits very squarely at the lower section of the lower worlds. Earth is a very basic evolutionary planet compared to everything else that exists. And so the original training program was created with many, many worlds of many, many variations of many, many historic events to enter into, explore, and understand. And that was the purpose of the training program, was to enter into it, explore it, understand, reflect, and then leave again. It was a training program. And so that's starting to set up the structure of this is not where we are, but this is what the original program originally was for. Okay. And I don't expect all of this to make sense straight away. I'll get the video prepared. I'll get it online, look at it again. This is all accurate, but as Alonis would often say, we're giving you the truth to understand it through your consciousness. It's not exactly like this at times, but it's accurate because they're very complex structures. There is a simplicity which we endeavor to go through tonight. But the information is accurate, but not complete. Probably best to put it that way. Yep. Okay. That's great. Okay. So this slide 2 represents just an indication of, I guess, to reinforce the fact that Earth, The diagram on the block diagram on the right side there, the 7 dimensions, you'll notice that's similar to the diagrams in the Illusion of Reality documentary, the 7 7 7 7 7s everywhere. This reality has 7 frequencies that are conscious, that primarily there's 7, and the universe, there's 7 universal layers, and there's 7 universes in that sense. And so Earth exists on the second universal layer. The lowest universal layer, there's no conscious sentient life. It's flora, fauna, planetary. It's basic life structure. It isn't actually sentient life. So this Earth is on the second evolutionary layer, and it's at the lower part of the second evolutionary layer. And so the circle represents the symbol of the entire program. Obviously, this small green slither represents a very small section, which is a generous section, but just for the terms of the diagram. And then, of course, the cube just represents the fact that Earth was a very, very small part of a very comprehensive and sophisticated program. Remember, this was created by us as what we really are, not by some mysterious light beings. We are those that created it at the highest level of our being. And it was an immensely sophisticated, beautiful, beautiful program, designed to enhance awareness, reflection on oneself, and because even beings in a light realm need to still reflect and evolve. Our understanding of light, I think, is very rudimentary. So that's kind of where Earth fit into the original program. Okay, jumping to this one, because again, this may seem a little disjointed, but when we go back over it again, when it's a recording with the information that comes next, and you go back on this, it'll hopefully make more sense. As I said, it's a task and a half to take 30 years of understanding into a couple of slides, but it's important for all of us to do that. So as you can see, there's no coincidence that we have a wheel of 12 parts. As I said, 7 parts relates to the universal structure that we recognize. So Earth, we are in a 6-sided cube. So there's the 6 facets of this wheel, 6-sided space, a cube. That's where we are. We can walk backwards and forwards, go up and down, and then the cube moves through time. But there's essentially 6 sides to the cube, and so the 7 is the center point. So the 7 is the new program. It's the center point. There is no variation. That's why I say so much to people, the new program is active, the possibilities are redundant, they're obsolete. There's only one way home. You can't go wrong. Even and Alanis would often say, you couldn't fail even if you wanted to, because it's all done. Now you just got to make your way home. Follow the sound, follow the gateway of your mind, follow your inner being, and you are already on your way home. At the same time, everything else is still happening because all time and space is simultaneous, and that's where we get a little bit fried in the brain sometimes. But in the point of this diagram on page 3, 6 components around the outside, which represents the 6 aspects of our reality. And this is why there's things like the 6 degrees of separation. They're not flukes; they're permutations of a fractal system. And so we have the 7, which is the center point. The 8 is what we call the 8th chamber, and the 8th chamber holds the instruction that is given to when people were ready to finish their experience. So when they'd learned what they needed to learn, the 9, 10, 11, 12 are what we call a quadrant system. They are matter, antimatter, masculine, feminine, dark, light. They are the 2 forces of reality that allow reality to be expanded in creation and inverted in completion. And so, for example, if you were wandering around the earth, for example, having an experience as a being of light in a human body, and you had finished your experience, just as Amon did in the greatest story never told, and then a voice spoke to him and said, Amon, you can come out now. Then the 8th chamber is the activation point that the inversion formulas commence your return journey, and then you will move into the central wheel. Your inversion and creation formulas balance each other off, and you return to the center point, and you exit, and you wake up. So that's the very simple process, and it's again, it's accurate but not complete. It's a very simple process, and that dot in the center, which is not a dot, just the center point, that's the 13th gate. That's why the 13 years between the experience I had on the 14th of this month was so significant, because it was 13 years between the 10th of February 2007 and the 10th of February 2020. The 13th point is the gateway beyond illusion to reality, which is why the gateway is so important. And Michael told me in 1996, he said, in the future, you'll work with people and you'll talk to people, and the gateway is a coding system that our people will recognize. So that's the gateway, is the 13th point in the center. But to get there, of course, we have to have the inversion formulas, which is light, and the creation formulas, which is a coding system of life. They have to be in place and activated, and we'll get into why that's very important shortly. Very, very important to notice, to understand that this is where the masculine and feminine comes in. We will all see that in this world. It's over dominant in masculine energy, the feminine, which is the inversion energy, the light energy, the intuitive energy. The feminine is in deficit, has been for a long time. It was created that way in the experiment to obviously affect the human mind and unbalance the human psyche. And we'll get to that a little bit later. But that's the way it's supposed to be, what you're seeing on slide 3. That's the way it was originally in the original training program, and that's the way it's supposed to be. So whenever I say the quadrant system, I'm talking about the 4 in the middle, and 9, 10, of course, is the minor and the major. 11 and 12 is the minor and the major. So there's 2 sets of 2 sounds, which is, as I said, 22 years since Alonus tells me about September 14. 22 years later, I have this experience, and there's 2 sets of 2 formulas in the quadrant system, so 22. So these number patterns keep coming up over and over and over again, and it's magical. It's just stunning. So, okay. So let's get to the beginning of where we are now. You've heard me speak before of what happened. Now, we've just gone through the original training program. We've just seen symbolically what it is: 120 worlds of Zor, many, many worlds, 3 main frequency layers. And in fact, the 10-dimensional hypercube has 5,120 facets. So there are thousands of worlds. A facet is a program aspect. So there are thousands and thousands of worlds in the original training program. You can imagine how amazing it would have been when we used to do that a long time ago. And so obviously I mentioned that the mid-heavens, the mid-evolutionary worlds, in the real, not in the training program, in the real, were filled with a lot of alien species and civilizations which are very advanced but not exactly evolved. And a group obviously wanted to utilize the Earth, because the Earth had a very strategic location in the second universal level, to dominate other worlds. So they chose Earth as a target. A group of alien entities from the mid-heavens approached Earth, and some of the people on Earth said, yes, we will give you the Earth training program if we can get it off those who created it in exchange for whatever they got. And so this alien group managed to obtain a very small section of the original training program, just the Earth section. And so this cube represents the training program section that they were able to obtain through deception. And they, as I've written here, what was an experience of awareness to grow was duplicated and turned into an experiment to exploit and destroy, because they wanted to use humanity as a race to overtake other worlds that could be completely controlled as a soldier race, essentially, which is why the transhumanist movement, of course, is so rife in this program, is because this is the memory of the experiment of what they wanted to achieve, but they failed to achieve it. And so these 3 circles represent the fact that the experiment, and this is information, again, compiled from years of experiences, gateway traveling, communication documents, So much experience. And so the three circles represent the fact that they completed the experiment twice and were rotating it a third time when they were discovered and stopped. And as I said before, that's an entirely other story. It's too big a story to bring into this here today. But it was stopped on the third rotation. And I personally believe, I can't validate this, but I personally believe this is why a lot of times things happen in threes, because it's a permutation of like an echo of a reality that was rotated three times around before it was stopped. And so we have an embedded fractal component that is in this program where things often happen in sets of threes. And I've experienced that myself countless times. So it doesn't always happen, but I believe when it does, it's a permutation of the fact that that's where it came from. And Alonus was very clear. He said, "What you look at when you see the world around you," he said, "the real Earth was never like this." And they took great care to explain that it never was. What we see never happened. It never did happen. It never would happen. It was never designed this way. It was only an experimental change and the fallout of a very tragic event. So it was never like this, and this isn't even happening. So just moving on to the fundamental structure of space, there's three main chambers. A chamber is just a structure of energy, and we exist. Well, the Earth and the program that was created, 120 worlds of Zor, existed in the main chamber. So that's the main part of the program. Then, of course, you had the central chamber, which, as I explained before, was what gave permission for someone to enter and exit, is what ultimately created matter, DNA, reality, and then inverted it again. So all of creation came from the inner chamber, but through the coding formulas of opposites of the central chamber. So the central chamber holds all of the codes to time and space, divisible variations of light, energy patterns, molecular patterns, civilizations, light blueprints, life blueprints, dimensional regions, evolutionary sectors. It's all encoded in the central chamber that permeates out into the main chamber as a result of coding. So what we experience here is a result of coding, not the actual coding itself. So it's like a light going through a prism. The prism could be seen as a central chamber. The light extends out and shines against the wall. The wall is the main chamber. That's where the picture appears. But the light itself comes through the prism to get to the wall. So that's kind of the main chamber from the central chamber. And the inner chamber, of course, is the center point of light. And that is what's real. Again, the 13th gate. And that is where we all entered from. And that's where we all return into. And so it's important again to understand that in the experiment, when they took the Earth and they decompiled the program, they built it up again, they turned it against itself, they corrupted the formulas, they turned it into an exploitation of the human mind and spirit, not the celebration of the exploration of life and light. And that's what they did. They broke the inversion formula. They disabled the inversion formula so the program could never find completion. And you find here now very little things find any form of completion in this program. Things start, then they change gear, and then they shift to something else. Very little completes in this program. In fact, arguably nothing, because the program, the experiment was corrupted so that it would loop. Because when a program can't complete itself, it goes on an endless loop, which is why it rotated once, twice, three times, and was intending to keep rotating until they had broken down humanity sufficiently enough to then leave the experiment behind and go to the real Earth, which is what they had planned to do, obviously. And so, of course, the formula that was disabled was the inversion light formula of antimatter and the feminine formula, which is why there's such a lack of the feminine grace, the sensitivity of the feminine, the inversion of the feminine, the collectiveness of humanity. People here, yes, of course we love. Everyone here has love in their heart. But as a civilization, of which there are mostly programmed people here, not sentient people, they exhibit a coding formula which does not understand completion and inversion and collectiveness. Everything here explodes outwardly. wars, everything that just destroys. Power is at insane levels here because it's an incomplete formula with a broken coding system that was only ever designed to keep humanity destroying itself in order to break it apart. I just think every day that it was stopped and that it never happened. But we're in the memory of the experiment. It's very important to understand that. So the structure of space is a threefold: a main chamber, which is where life exists; the central chamber, which is where all the coding formulas exist; and the inner chamber, which is our entry and exit point. Slide 6, and I'll probably 1 second. I'll pause after slide 7 because it's a lot of information and it may or may not make sense at this point in time. Kind of in a stunned state of I just don't understand, but I kind of do, but don't. You may not be feeling that, but the information is also designed to trigger your deeper mind. It's designed to trigger the part of you that knows this, that recognizes this. And it's also designed to give your deeper core being the trigger that it is safe, because a lot of us had to hide, and I'll get to that shortly.
Can I
So
ask a question? It's Kathleen.
please, hi Kathleen, go ahead, please.
Yeah, hi. Just and I'm not meaning to play God here. But you said, yeah, you did say we're in the memory of the experiment, and I've heard that many times.
Mhm.
But on the 8, the section that's the where all the codes are,
That one there.
yeah, the central chamber. Are
Mhm.
we? I get that we are real, and let's say we're projecting in. I get the whole hologram sort of thing. But from the outside, are we able to project in and change the codes in the central chamber to change the experience here for, that we're having ourselves? You
Okay.
know, people are having spontaneous healings or something like that.
Yep.
Is there?
Okay. Okay. So I would ask you the question is as to why do you think you need to change the program here?
Because I'd like things in my physical life to be a little different than what they are.
Yep. Yep. And that's absolutely fair enough. At the same time, this program has been created exactly the way that they needed it to be created for reasons that I'll explore shortly. And we all deserve, personally, we all deserve a life that makes us happy. We all deserve a life that gives us what we need to survive and thrive. The reality itself, in terms of a larger scale picture, was created as it was needed to be created for access points into what we will understand soon to be duplicate space. So the kicker is, if you could leave your body behind and become the greater part of yourself that was projecting in through here, you wouldn't be you anymore, and you'd have a different perspective, and you'd have a different frame of mind, and you wouldn't want the same things that you want as a human being, because the
Mm,
way things are now are the way it's designed them to be as a collective force of light. Now, that doesn't mean we don't want to. We want to be healthy. We want to have financial security. Of course, we do. All those things are naturally human, and the program has been set up in a way to give us everything we need. It may not give us everything we want, but it gives us everything we need. Because the without meaning to sound cold, the point here isn't our individual happiness. It's actually the purpose of why we're even alive.
mm,
And so it's a matter of perspective. I had to confront that a lot, greatly within myself, when Diane got sick, when and of course when you go through troubles and challenges financially, health wise, everything. And so it all forms a part of a much bigger framework of purpose. So
mm,
if I was to move beyond myself and become a greater part of myself, I would make the same decisions that I'm already making from another part of myself, and I wouldn't necessarily make the decisions that I would make as a human being.
mm,
And that's why manifestation is greatly misunderstood, because it's not an infinitely abundant quantum field. It is a quantum field with a limited parameter of possibilities, and we don't have the ability to recreate reality. If something happens, it's in the field, it's in the possibility that's been activated. But I do believe we all have the ability to reach the highest potential, and I don't think a lot of us vibrate to the highest potential of our being here. So, to me, the new program, they've always said it's the best opportunity. You're going home anyway, but they would say that the new program is the best possibility and you're going home regardless. But I believe what we experience in our lives, if we are aligning steadily, and we can't do it all in one hit because there's a lot of energy change that goes on. But if we are aligning to the energy of our being consciously, then we are going to draw ourselves into the best possibility of our life. So I always believe things can get better, Kathleen. I always do,
Mm,
because I believe that there is a way that we can find a balance between what we need and what they need. I do
mm,
believe that. Yeah, but I guess the main point from your question is the answer is yes. If you could leave here, go into the central chamber, and look at the codes to time and come back in again, yes, you could, but you already don't because that's what you are anyway, and you've decided to create this because that's what's needed. Because your
mm,
life could traverse a pathway that is very important for what you are to meet certain conjunctions, certain people, certain places, uh, perfectly by design. And that isn't sidestepping the need to feel happy, but what it means is that things are this way by design. But I do believe we can always resonate to the highest frequency and make our lives the best possible life we can. I do believe that because that's a part of the program as well.
mm. Cool. Thanks.
Okay. 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 So we were just here. So the the Earth as a experiment had to be entered into because they wanted to recode it. So as you can see, in the central area there, there's the coding systems symbolized by those four quadrant systems. And so they needed to enter into this reality in order to recode it, so activate and repair the codings in the central chamber, and then restore the main chamber so that all those stuck in the main chamber, the humans at the time, could then exit through the central chamber and leave through the inner chamber. And so three aspects of light from a greater energy entered, and those were given the names of Michael, Alonus, and Azil. Iziel entered first as the lowest frequency, and then Alonus and Michael. They just have different ranges of energy, and that was the plan to enter into the corrupted Earth once it had been secured, and it had been, I guess, was under control. And in order to enter that duplicated Earth, that was the plan. Enter in firstly through the inner and then the central chamber, repair the codes with the new program frequency, and then recode the main chamber and let everyone leave back through the inner chamber. That was the idea because that's the way the original program opened up and closed down. So what happened was Azil entered first, and so Azil held codes to recode the central chamber and to repair it, and so the main chamber could be restored. When Azil entered into the central chamber was so deeply corrupted that his energy, being a being of light, his energy was not able to sustain a high frequency. And if you can imagine, if you have a lens and you shine a very powerful light through that lens, the lens distorts the light. It's not that the light fails, but the lens distorts the light. And so Azil's energy was distorted and it destabilized. And it started to send a shockwave of sorts through the central chamber, which would have led to a catastrophic event. But when it started to destabilize, Alonus, from what he has told us, entered in directly afterwards, and he needed to enter in very quickly because Michael from the real side shut down the access point to the program. And Alonus entered in after Azil, and Alonus entered into the main chamber and essentially was planning to and stayed there for a long, long time. And Aziel's energy got stuck in the space. And this is where I've mentioned it before, but it's very important. This is the point where all the stories of the fallen one comes from. Everything from Lord of the Rings through to the Emperor in Star Wars, through to Satan himself. These are all stories of a great being that turns and becomes dark. Like when Gandalf's teacher touches the eye or whatever that thing is in the Lord of the Rings and turns. It's exactly the same thing. Good people turned because it's overwhelming fear, overwhelming negativity. And so Aziel turned, Aziel fell. And I have, in many of my experiences, particularly over the past year, I've come face to face with Aziel. I can talk about it now without being upset, because it is the most fundamentally profound experience to come face to face with a being at different. And I've come across him both when has been dark, and I've come across him as he's starting to wake up, and I've come across him as he is wanting to leave. And they've been the most profound experiences. And Aziel is not bad. People have a lot of things to say about the darkness here. The darkness isn't the being. The darkness is the formulas and the eruption of darkness that came from the power of a light being that fell under the weight of fear and darkness and was trapped underneath it. The story of Atlas is very much this as well. A being trapped under the weight of the world that has to hold the world up. That's Aziel. Atlas is Aziel. All these mythological stories come from the facts of what actually happened in the very beginning. And so Aziel was trapped, and Diane had an experience in May 2000 where she encountered Aziel for the very first time in a place that it was trapped, and it couldn't get out. And it was, if you can imagine a being of light trapped in a confined space, trying to get out for 1 billion years. Can we even imagine that? And that's actually what it's been like for this being. 1 billion years. While the program swirls around on the outside, while beings of darkness get stronger, dimensional beings fight and try and destroy anyone who tries to save this Aziel or reach this Aziel. It's been nothing short of a universal battle for so long. But this being Aziel came in as the first, and he will leave as the last. And it's not his fault. And Alonus came in afterwards and permeated into the main chamber. And that's why Alonus was in Atlantis. That's why Alonus was in Egypt. That's why Alonus was in the Mystery Schools character Asma in Egypt. And that's why Alonus came through to this life. Alonus is the aspect of our real light energy that permeates the human experience. And Aziel was obviously a denser level that got caught up in the denser levels, but not because of its fault. And so the higher energy empowered the lower worlds. And that's why there is so much delusions of grandeur in this program. All the human beings who think they're a god, all of the people who take so much power and wealth, and they separate themselves from the masses, thinking that they have the right to do so. These are people who are fractal permutations of the coding system that wants to be the god of this universe. And we see it everywhere, in everything from Marvel comics through to religion. It's everywhere because it's the same fractal system that permeates reality. And so when people say they want to be the god of this world, which is what AI is very dangerously heading towards, this singularity, they're trying to become Aziel. The human beings, the elite, they're all trying to become immortal. They're trying to become singularity gods. They're trying to become everything that gives them the power to dominate this reality. They're trying to become the PowerPoint of creation. And they never can, but that's their delusion because they're programmed that way, because they're an effect of a coding system of a dense evolutionary level that exploded out into a supernova explosion of reality that was completely and totally compromised in every way with no feminine formula, only masculine, expanding out, dominating everything. And this is where it all started. And so the codes to time were misused. And as I said in the bottom line here, some turned because they became afraid and the darkness overcame them because of their fear. That's why I say to people all the time, don't be afraid. Your fear will engulf you. If you're afraid, you empower separation, you empower illusion. Yes, sometimes fear comes easily, but don't let it stay. Some were overwhelmed. There were some who were very close to a zeal. As a group of our people were very close to a zeal, and almost like a gravity well. When a zeal fell, they were drawn into the gravity well of darkness, and they were overwhelmed and they were turned, and they became what we call the Red Brigade, which was a very dense, very, very volatile group of beings that were hunting out all of us. And many of us had to go and hide in time, hide in Egypt, hide in civil war, hide in the French Revolution, hide in the future, hide in other places. A lot of us went running when this happened because there was nowhere to go, because Michael had to close off the doorway out of here because otherwise it would have been an unmitigated disaster. But there is an interesting twist. And for many, many years, they told us there's a twist. And I only sadly understood what the twist was after Diane was gone because of the information I got from Diane after she passed and the information I started to put together with those keys that I was given. They suspected this would happen all along. And so, even in the failure, they embedded a backup plan of success. And we are the living proof of that success because we're here and we're all going home. And I'll get to that in more detail. Just let it sit. It's taken a long time to get this far. This explains what I just said. So when Aziel fell, and you remember he held the codes to creation. He was going to recode the central chamber and restore the Earth program, just the Earth program. But just like a supernova star, he collapsed in on himself. The codes activated, and then he exploded back out an entire new version of creation, but one that was dark. This is, as I said, this is where the whole Star Wars thing comes from. The Emperor, spreading through the universe, dominating everything. They're all symbols and stories of what actually happened. So he duplicated because just like in holographic mathematics and holographic principle, the smallest piece contains the whole. So the Earth component contained the entire 120 programs. So when he inverted and exploded out again, he recreated all of the worlds of Zor in the image of darkness, not in the way they originally were. And this became duplicate space. So what was once one world of Earth became 120 evolutionary sectors and worlds. Now, so where are we? We have to understand that duplicate space was created as a closed system. When the energy of Aziel fell, of course, it's a very intelligent energy, and it reinforced its reality to be a closed reality. And that's why in the documentary, I use the analogy of the box. I say in the documentary, if you don't know what's in the box until you open it, how do you prepare for it? And so, because the greater plan knew this was a possibility, that the energy would not be sustained and would be corrupted and would invert, that's why Alonus moved in quickly after. Alonus was the linchpin of the new program. And so Alonus entered in and permeated the space. But of course, Alonus has the real codes, so he couldn't be seen by the Aziel creation. He couldn't be seen. So Alonus was in the duplicate space. And so what the real did, so from outside of here, what the real did is they created a reproduction of Earth, and they put it on the outside of the duplicate space, on the edge, almost like a thin layer on the edge. And that's where we exist. This Earth, that's why it's only a very small program, as a doorway. It's the only way they have. They have relative access. So relativity is important. You could not get into the duplicate space unless you had access to it via a relative perspective. And so from duplicate space, they created the Earth that we live in today, which is what we call recreation. This is recreation, it's a simulation. And so they had to find a way to get into duplicate space to get to the very core of duplicate space, because only at the core could you reach the exit point. And so we exist here in human beings to hold position. And that's why when people say, what's the purpose? Well, the purpose is to hold position and to resonate to the greatest essence of light you can possibly hold. And to know that all is in hand, and to know that you came here for the purpose to hold your energy. Now, the memory lots of us have of other missions, battles, star battles, planetary battles, converting energies, saving energies, they're all very real memories. But a lot of people get caught up from a human level. They may have memories of these kinds of things, but the human being is not in control. We're not. We don't know enough. We may have an idea that we can do things, but we don't know enough. We are a small part of a major energy structure. Humility has a big part to play in this mission. So a lot of people think that they do grandiose things, and they probably have a memory of doing grandiose things, but not as a human being, as a greater part of their own being. And credit to them for the greater part of their own being, because we all have amazing experiences, but the human being doesn't control them. 99% of my experiences I bring back from the night, or I'm triggered through meditation. But the human being, its main priority is to remember that we are here to hold position for what we are. It's us. It's not someone else. It's us. But we hold position in the earth. And when we go to sleep at night, our real energy enters through this consciousness, through our subconscious, through our unconscious, through our etheric layers of this program into the duplicate space. And that's where the battles are fought. That's where we're won and lost. That's where it all takes place. And those battles are ultimately what allowed the centermost point of duplicate space to be accessed. And that's when the shift occurred, is when they accessed the center point of space and broke through to the real original program where our people are residing and holding position, waiting. And it needs to be understood that the defense mechanism that this program put up was nothing short of almost impossible to get through. This is why even all the way through to why Hollywood decides to make so many horror films, why no one's allowed to understand the paranormal, why religion shuns anything that's supernatural. They're all coordinated plans to stop people feeling safe to investigate what's deeper down in the space, because it doesn't want anyone to know. The most obvious access point is Antarctica. That's why it's shielded by the United Nations treaty. No one's allowed to go there. Why? Because that's an opening in the program where the people who think they're real in this program think that they can get into the duplicate space and live on as immortal singularity human cyborgs. That's why they shield off Antarctica, because it's a portal to other layers of the Earth. Very likely those layers in the duplicate space of Earth. This Earth only has one, but there's other layers of Earth in the duplicate space and in deeper levels. And so we have to be aware that this is a holding station. And just like a patchwork quilt that's made up of all different colors and sections and designs and patterns, this reality is a patchwork of memory. And that's why the moon on the 14th of September was 30 degrees at least up higher in the sky. The next night it was back down to the horizon again. Why? Because this isn't real. This is an illusion. They can adjust anything they want, which is why if they needed to adjust something, they would adjust something. And that's not the favorite answer of most people, but for 32, 33 years, I've lived it, and Diane lived it 15 years before me. And it's consistently the truth every single time. And there's a great beauty in that. So This is what happened on the shift. So obviously the cube is here. We have our consciousness, and then we have all the etheric levels. And the etheric levels are the astral planes and the many, many thought worlds that exist within the astral plane and the deeper etheric levels. Now, a lot of people believe they do all kinds of things. Maybe they do. I hope they're remembering the real, but very often hear the stories and I'm aware that they're actually existing within the etheric levels, creating the thought that they're doing something else when they're actually not. And that isn't a popular view because a lot of people want to believe they're doing good, and I get that. I totally understand that. But we have to understand that this world was sabotaged so deeply that nothing wanted anyone to get through the etheric levels. And the etheric levels are like a labyrinth. It took the great ones and driving us and not telling us most of the things half the time, the better part of 25 years to get through the etheric levels, constantly meeting dead ends, constantly being tricked, constantly being attacked. And so the etheric levels are many, many layers of thought worlds, alien levels, otherworldly levels. And when I say thought worlds, they literally are worlds created by thought alone. Some of them don't ever end. And so people get lost in etheric worlds and they're still there until the new program's activated. And so it took a long time, and that's why what's that phrase? You hide the light behind such total darkness that no one is brave enough, or everyone's too afraid to investigate their thoughts, their feelings, the deeper levels of their fears. A lot of the agenda planted ideas into people's head, fearful memories, fearful experiences that never actually happened, to make them afraid, so they wouldn't go looking. And those who did go looking were very quickly attacked. And that's what happened up until 2020. So years and years and years of research and work by the greater plan got everyone through, or got them through the etheric levels into the very core, and then they got through the X, which is the gateway, through to the real, and then the real was able to enter back along that arrow, come back into this place here, and start to recode and establish the new program. So everybody in that cube, as soon as the shift occurred through all of time, that's why I say 10th of February 2020 and all time. As soon as that access point was made to the real entered straight back in and permeated through all of time, and everybody was connected to the real from February 2020. And that's why after that, it's been an absolute difficult time, to say the least, because we were and still are in some way experiencing the fallout and the shockwave of such an enormous retaliation by the program, which has already lost. And that's where COVID comes in. It came in literally 17 days after Diane passed away. They told us it was coming. They told us that the future had sent down ripples through time to try and stop the real. They told us that on the July 2018, they told us that this was coming. And then, of course, the great ones, Diane, got through just in the nick of time. It sounds like a movie, but it's unfortunately tragically real. Things are on the right track, and that's the thing that I want to make very clear. This almost the last slide. So we're in that cube, and so this is essentially a diagram that was given to us in 1994. And just a diagram to explain that the Alonus energy created what they call the reflective chamber, and that was an energy structure that allowed for us in the duplicate space, the cube is us, to wake up, and to wake up sufficiently where we could resonate to the energy of light that we all hold. And then, of course, the shift I've just talked about is the downward arrow to get to the bottom of the space, to then bridge across to the real to get out of here. And so that diagram is more for your subconscious, because your being will recognize that diagram. as a 3-chamber process. The reason it's major, delta, and omega is because major was introducing the major coding systems into the human consciousness. Delta, of course, delta means time. We are here in time. And omega, of course, means the end. So alpha, omega, alpha, delta, alpha, major. That is the recoding into time to go home. So just a summary sheet there. Where are you? Where are we? We are in that very small cube of Earth. We call it recreation. It sits against and inside the space. So if it's actually inside the space of the duplicate, but it's easier to imagine it just being on the edge. And the duplicate creation, we call it the shadowlands because they are a shadow of their former self. And then, of course, there's the real. So there's 3 aspects of space here. There's recreation, where we are. There's the duplicate space, which is where all of the battles and all of the everyone got lost, everyone got trapped, everyone got stuck, where Zeal got stuck. And then there's the real, which is the recreated original program as a base of operations, if you like, to run this whole evacuation and restoration process. And in the end, that's what it all is. It's 2 aspects of creation being restored so that within the circle of space, the upward triangle of creation and the downward triangle of inversion come together as one. And when that happens, we are all in the center point and we all leave exactly the way we came, out the center point. And then space itself is inverted. It doesn't exist anymore. There isn't empty space. There isn't a program left over. It's like a dream when you wake up. I said to Grant last time, when you wake up, it's not existent anymore. It's like a vacuum. It's like a balloon. When you let down a balloon, if you could let down a balloon that was full of air infinitely until it was a dot, that's the same thing. There's nothing left inside. And Michael once said that we should imagine all of reality existing on the head of a pin, because that's actually how big it is. That's a lot of information. I've spoken for probably an hour and a half. I guess I don't want to necessarily speak anymore. I don't know whether there is any questions. It reminds me so often when the great ones would speak through Diane, and we would sit there in stunned silence sometimes because we wouldn't know what to ask. So if there is any questions, that'd be wonderful. Mary.
Yes, thank you, Jason. Great job with the slides. They were really valuable. Just my understanding of the recreated space and the duplicate space. So the recreated space is a closed system, but I didn't know we gained access to the duplicate space in our night state. Is that
Yes.
the only time we can gain access to it?
No, not at all. No, but that's the most obvious one, because we literally disengage a lot of times with our body, and we travel through the night state. So not at all. So for example, when I had the experience and I saw the moon, that me looking back at me was the me on the real Earth, reaching back into me here. So it was 9:09 p.m. at night. I was fully awake, and it came through. It can do that because of the access point with the shift. So you can meditate, and that's why the gateway experiences are so important, because we can learn to meditate and go inward and travel. That's Diane created the Mind Travel program back in 2012-13, and that's all about traveling. That's all about leaving the body behind with our consciousness and traveling. So, Mary, we can go there again, but that's regulated by our energy, not by our human being.
Oh, okay. So my understanding, if I can word this properly, is that when Aziel inverted and he took the Earth program and made it inverted duplicate 120 worlds of Zor, an aspect of ourselves was then made into the duplicate program. So that's what you're saying when you saw the moon, it came from the duplicate you in the duplicate program, I think you said.
when Azil, when that inversion took place, I don't believe that the real us was created in that program by Azil. I think that was the Earth fashioned in a very dystopian fashion. I believe that what I saw, that's the real me in the real original program.
Okay, because Aziel, he closed the system when he inverted, didn't he? Didn't you say that too? Yeah,
That's
shut the
correct.
door.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Alonus was on the inside, though.
Okay, yeah. And then
Yeah.
the shift has changed everything as well.
True. That's right. That's right. Yeah, and that's why it's always a challenge, because we know that we perceive this as a three-dimensional linear thing, and yet we have to try and imagine multiple spaces, no time, because it's all happening at once. And not only does all time happen at once, but all space happens at once.
Yeah,
So
it's incredible.
it is. So and that's why we say, well, okay, there's the original entry of Azil, then there's another version, and another version. We're in the seventh rotation of the actual thing, and so all these four, since the experiment, are happening at the same time. So, and Lonis would often say, did it happen? Is it happening? Or will it happen? The answer is yes. And so it's very hard to get our head around. That's why it's so hard to create diagrams that actually can depict it
because
accurately.
they were really good. So when you make one change in one of the 7 levels, does it then have a flow-on effect to all the others?
Well, a flow-on effect would denote a linear passage of time.
Okay, yeah.
So, and that's why it's very hard to conceptualize. But what we know is that what I've experienced is, when the shift occurred in our conscious point at the 10th of February 2020, the entry back through that point then went to all space and all time, all space, all the time. And so there's layers of memory where the real isn't there, and there's layers of memory where the real is there. And the whole challenge is to then gradually pull all that together into one space, not multiple spaces. And that's beyond our conscious ability to comprehend, but that's the concept that I understand it best as.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks very much.
I hope that's answered the question.
No, that's good.
So I know that's a lot of information, and if anyone has any general questions, it doesn't have to be about the slides. You're more than welcome to ask.
Jason, it's Joan here.
Hi, Joan.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to. It kind of goes back to Kathleen's question regarding what can we do to change, and maybe can we affect the codes that are set up for us. And you were talking about that we are who we are, and we will remain that, and take advantage of the possibilities that are available to us. Is that correct? To change, to gain, to gain more coherence and to gain more. Is that correct?
It is. So the way that I think the best way to explain it would be that I believe and experience that we are transitioning from the way it was to the new program, and I believe that's a frequency adjustment. And so that's why I've mentioned before to Kathleen, the new program operates on a higher frequency. So our inner being is connected to the journey home. It goes home no matter what.
Yay!
And that's the beautiful thing. No matter what, we go home because we're connected the instant the shift occurred. But that's our energy being. So that's us, who we really are. On a human level, the more we work to align ourselves to that energy of what we really are, then the more we will resonate to an energy which I believe will help activate any residual possibilities that can enhance life, health, life pathway.
Right.
I believe it's in place, and they have suggested many times in the past that they always give you the best scenario, and then it's up to you to make sure you meet the right frequency. So it's important that which is why the gateway experiences are important. It's important to resonate to the deepest memory of what we are, because when we do that, we're resonating and changing our frequency, and we will attract what's in place already for us to step into for the rest of our life. So I believe we can improve our life. I believe
Mm,
we can improve our health. We can. How aligned are we to our real energy? That's the question, which is why we can't stop trying. We can't stop working.
right.
Yeah.
Do we have any tools here now that are real and not sabotaged? Any programs? What I'm thinking about is like that we've just had, a huge experience. Well, some have through the equinox and the eclipse and just what was going on in energy. And is that a program?
The eclipse or the energy?
Well, the energy.
Well, it's all a program. All of it's a program. This is engineered by the greater plan, so it utilizes the program to do what it needs to do, and that's why I always found the same thing. I find a lot of very powerful experiences on the conjunctions, the celestial conjunctions, the lunar conjunctions. A lot of experiences because they utilize those conjunctions and they've organized those conjunctions in the program, and so it's all coding.
When you say they,
The great ones who have created
yes,
this
yes,
created space. So it's created using all of the coding information that was available to them from the what was created from the experiments. They've
yeah,
taken that and they've refashioned it into a version that's compatible as an entry point to the duplicate space, but is utilized by them. So
right,
they've created this, and that was one of the hardest things to understand was if this place is so horrible a lot of the times, if there's so much death and destruction, if there's so much cruelty, if there's so much unkindness and so little love, what's the point? Why are we here?
yeah,
And we had to, they helped us slowly understand, and we had to learn ourselves that it was designed specifically to be relative. Because if you're trying to access a program that is full of chaos, then you have to have a program that's compatible with that to access it. And so
mhm,
many of the events in this program were designed and maintained that way to access what was down below. But the new program means there's another frequency available.
right, exactly. So it is holding our own
Yes,
and working at getting to the higher frequencies.
absolutely it is. And so
Right.
we have infinite potential because we have the ability to tap into the deepest reserve of light that we can. We have an unlimited potential to remember more and more and more and more and more because we're tapped into the energy of light that carries us home. So we have infinite potential. But in terms of infinite possibilities, they don't exist in this reality. It's a variation of possibilities that is finite. But the best one is what we can resonate to by remembering and lifting our frequency to that awareness. That's right.
Yeah, and by remembering the potential idea of your course on dreams is one way that we could access
Correct.
possibly the truth of who we are.
Correct.
And what about the use of tools such as crystals or the med beds that I haven't heard much about lately, but different things like that. Are they available as helping us to remember?
If you have a tool that works for you that enhances your ability to find your greatest potential, then by all means, there's use
Perfect. Okay.
I don't use anything. Diane never used anything. Alonus never spoke that favorably about crystals. But if you find something that works for you, if it enhances your energy, if it's a tool, if it's a catalyst, if it's some kind of
Mm,
resonator or some kind of focus point, my goodness, Joni, if it works to help you remember and resonate, then no one's anyone to say no to that.
right. Right. So it's not necessarily part of the programming
No,
that we've been.
no, because if we realize that all we are is light, and we are obviously light incumbent in a human program. And so we go inward to find that light, not outward.
Yes.
And so
Oh, yes. Yes, I agree with that completely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if we use tools, we've done a lot of, and I would like to do it again. We can use a lot of techniques such as intuitive development, and they're tools on the outside to use to stimulate the inner ability and the
Yeah.
inner intuitive. So, again, if a tool serves you and it's not at all, it's not going to be a deficit to you or anyone else, then it can only help.
Cool. Yeah. Right. Yep. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Does anyone else have a question at all?
Yeah, I've just got a, you know how, so I sort of say we're becoming more real, but it's sort of like we are accessing at different times the real and kind of bringing it in to here. Well, not we, but it's happening through us. Do you think like the trees and the animals, and I kind of feel all of them are sort of like shifting as well and becoming quite different?
Well, they're just a program. They're what a lot of us would call a backdrop. So it's context in the program. They're not conscious. There's an energy field. Yes, there is a collective energy of Earth. This reproduces the way it actually was for a real functional planet. So because we are relative to the trees, we are relative to the valleys, we are relative to the oceans, we're relative to the plants, we have an energy field that is relative to their energy field. So we will always feel the essence. And there is a fundamental shift of frequency in terms of the coding systems. Now, whether you can detect that in plants and trees, I haven't. I certainly find their frequency very lovely. I love to be amongst nature. It's very therapeutic. But it's a program that at a deeper level, yes, arguably there'd be recoding going on because it's part of the reality that we're existing within. But when we look at the main point, and the main point is that beings of light that came here to save human beings who were vacated, by the way, and beings of light who got stuck in physical bodies, physical time frames, non-physical bodies, and etheric worlds. The whole point is to locate them all and get them home. No trees, no rocks, no valleys, no animals, even though animals are beautiful. I love animals, but our people are light in human beings or light in etheric layers. And so, yes, you might find that you perceive changes. And again, I want to stress very clearly, I'm a human being in this program. I love things that make me feel good too. And so it's not discrediting those things, but they're certainly not a part of the mission, if I could put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
But part of the mission is for us to recognize our realness, who we really are. Is that it?
That is
it. That is the way we can help those that are still caught.
Correct. That's absolutely correct. Because that's our mission. Our mission is to remember that we are more than who we believe we are. And our mission is to remember that we are not the human being that we exist within, but we are an essence of light that is here to perform a very important job. And that job is to access and did the duplicate space, locate all that were lost, restore the balance of light, and to then, as a part of that greater structure of light, vacate together as one. And
Right.
I do believe that I'm hopeful, and I do believe from my own feelings that the future that we're heading towards is a better place. I believe that there is changes coming. I don't believe that all the doom and gloom is necessarily going to happen, because what we have to understand as well is that this program was constructed from essentially all of the waste programs from the experiment. And so we are by definition existing in a program that was built on all the parts of the experiment that failed. So nothing that we see around us actually ever worked, even in the experiment. So
Right.
the Trumps and the Musks and the Russians and the Chinese and all that kind of stuff, everything that they think they're doing, they're all program parts put together from the offcuts of an experiment which never actually even succeeded.
Mm.
And so none of this stuff that we see actually has a result. It's just constant flow of possibilities.
Yeah, and that is what's so exciting, is that we're seeing things that we would never have been able to dream could take place in the positive going on. And I think that there's lots of room. It's like, the anticipation of watching what's going to take place next.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm hopeful that that things will be for the human being certainly lovely. I'm not expecting it, but I'm hopeful because I believe that we have to function here. We can't do a good job in remembering if we're not functioning in a way that's compatible with life. And so I do believe in better things. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do believe in better things, and that's
Mm.
why it's so important to resonate to an energy of light. And maybe Kathleen, that harkens back to your question. If that's what you're feeling within the program, if you're feeling an energetic change in the program, then embrace that. Because if you're detecting an energy that's deep, that's light, that's recoding, if you're detecting that, embrace that. And
Mm.
anything that you find that makes you feel an essence of something greater that's making a difference, embrace that. As long as we know why we're here and that we're not here to fix the program, we're not here to make this a utopia. It'd never be utopia. We're not here to change it. We're here to work through it, and that's the most important part of all.
Mm.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful. I sometimes run the risk of sounding a bit serious and sounding a bit gloomy because I have sometimes a bit of a cold, factual look on things. I don't. I have the greatest respect and love for everything I'm saying. It's a very serious mission. The seriousness will never outweigh the joy of being able to remember that there is an essence of light, and that light is just pure love that permeates through all things. And that's why it's so important to find that inner light, because that's what balances the energy that we have, and that's what allows us to be a doorway for an even greater part of us to move through.
Mm.
And if we do that, then by resonating to a higher light, a greater light, if we do that, then that ultimately was the thing that we contributed to the plan by the time we all get out of here. So we have to do what we've always done to be able to achieve what we've already achieved. We have to still keep doing it. It sounds like a paradox, but it's just a symmetry of light.
Mm. And just going back to the very first or second slide, it was around 1 into 12 sectors. My visual to the middle of it. So once again, is that a 13th gateway? The 13th gateway.
Yeah, so the crossover where the quadrant crosses over
Yes.
the center point is the 13th point. And that's what Michael called the gateway. So that is the point that when we balance the positive and negative, we balance life and light, we balance our energy structure, we have no fear, we're not caught up with love, the image of love. I mean, when we're balanced and when we are unified and when we're symmetrical with our awareness, so life and light coexist as one awareness. We're not running away from life to get to light. We're balanced. When we do that, then we automatically move into the center point, and we automatically move through the center point of the 13th gate, and we can remember and travel beyond that. Now, then that opens up into an enormous discussion around formulas of light, which is 32, 64, way beyond 13. But 13 is the gateway that's most important. The gateway is the key of remembering what we are whilst we're still within illusion. And that's, if you wanted to summarize the mission is to remember that you are real whilst inhabiting illusion.
I love that.
Well, it's been a real pleasure to talk to everyone tonight. I hope it was of value with the diagrams. They are very rudimentary but accurate, and I hope it's opened up some discussion and give you some questions. As I said, never believe what I say, but take what resonates to you. I can only give you everything that I live and that I know, and I can pass on the grace and the power of devotion that Diane embodied. And as I steadily compile years and years and years of documents, thank you, Mary, then the story keeps getting more accurate and more refined. And that's part of the next job for me, is to keep compiling all the information, because what we've just touched on is literally just the surface. But it's everything at the same time, if that makes sense. It's
Thank
okay.
you. Thank you.
Real pleasure. Yep. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you for your curiosity. Thank you for your love, and thank you for wanting to know. I really appreciate it very much. And we will have another one next month. And not sure what it'll be about yet, but it'll be something. But we'll just keep moving, because there's lots of things to uncover.